Ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, olúwa mi ò dìde ojó ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀.
Welcome to the Ashen Forge Thursday edition. I am Phantom X, joined by Diggs and the legendary Neurotoxin. How are you fine gentlemen doing?
Great.
It's Thursday. Kind of weird. It's a Sunday, but had a little delay, so we're going to actually go over the live stream. I assume everyone's had a chance to watch or catch the notes, or both. I was going to kind of go just from the start down, but I don't know if there's anything that either of you found really pressing to kind of talk about or go into.
No, I would say just giving some quick thoughts, and having now played a little bit of Baldur's Gate 3 and watched some of Pantheon. I'm really liking the Ashes of Creation fashion a lot. I wish we could probably see some more fashion types that were more like, more wilder instead of citified. I forget the word I'm looking for. But I'm very inspired by the costumes that I see in Ashes, and not quite as inspired by the costumes that I see in Baldur's Gate so far, and in especially not in Pantheon. I really love the look of Ashes. Just looking at what we saw on Friday was great.
That's an interesting thing to bring up. Because that's part of it. There was a discussion about how they'll handle armor, and basically saying that the same armor piece will look different, right, across.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was something that I thought was really cool. If you have a certain piece of equipment that you pick up and put on your character, versus the same item somebody else could pick up and put on their character, it's the same item. It looks very similar, but it's going to have a little bit of different flair based on the race that your character is. So some of them will maybe have, like, one of them was a armor that on one type it's got these little banner sorts of things, got a little bit more like fanfare and showiness, while the other example had more like straps and binding and seemed a lot more utilitarian and less flashy. So just that is one example I really like to kind of show what sort of variants we're looking at here, because you could tell it was the same item in general, but just a little bit of variance, just enough to kind of know who's wearing it too.
Yeah, with that in mind, I'd forgotten about that. And that does bug me. Hopefully it's closer to what we see in World of Warcraft. But I do like it when I can have one race wear the clothing of another culture. I don't necessarily want to always, because that comes with individuality. It's more role playing. It gives more. Well, it's hard to say that, right? I guess it depends on what you're looking for from role play, but it gives more individuality in that, so one of the things that I like to do in World of Warcraft is start off as a halfling, and as soon as I start as a halfling, I run over to to an elf village or a human village or a Tauren village, and I wear the costumes from the other culture. Um, I like doing stuff like that, and I'm not sure I'll really be able to do that in Ashes, and I would like to be able to do that in Ashes, but it depends on how much it changes.
It's one of those things where if they didn't have a robust plan for skins and what you see is what you get, or I think there's a way you can just ignore skins and just have the what you see is what you get version. They might have said something about being able to toggle that. I can't recall. I'd like to be able to. But I think one of the things that'd be kind of interesting with it is seeing how that sort of thing plays into espionage and war sort of stuff, that you're specifically wearing the style of armor that would be expected of the culture owning the node, not the one that's attacking it, and trying to see how far out of visual identification of your nameplate distance, how close you'd be able to get with a large force before they'd realize, oh crap, they're wearing our armor, but they're wearing full helmets. We don't actually know who's in those things. That kind of goes away, if you don't have things that are 100% representative, and all the skins and everything is unfortunately going to kind of ruin that. But if that wasn't the issue, then I it's just one of those things. Again, I agree with you, Diggs, that just being able to have it as a form of expression would be kind of nice. It'd be nice if there was an explanation for why they're doing it that way. For example, if there's going to be certain proportional variance between the different races, such that one would, look different wearing it as the other one, because, where everything's positioned would be a bit off. Okay, I can understand that, but I would imagine then it should at least fit for, the same, people that are a lot more similar to one another than the ones that are the larger variants.
Yeah, I mean, I think to some extent we want, well, especially it depends on if you're just finding some random piece of armor out, or if it's supposed to be cultural. I mean, like if it's supposed to be, um, maybe I should say, like if it's made by Nakua, then I would want it still to look like a Nakua, even if I'm wearing it as a human or wearing it as an elf or even a dwarf. Um,
I'm just trying to wrap my head around the models that they'll, to have such variation amongst, race and gender. I'm just wondering. I mean, that seems very ambitious. I mean, it's obviously possible, but and maybe it's a lot simpler than what we realize. But it just seems like I love the idea, right? It should be that way. I mean, the thing that always drove me nuts as we sort of had a progression or an evolution of MMORPGs is how everyone kind of had the same looking gear. It didn't always used to be that way. Vanilla WoW, EverQuest, you could tell something about a player by what they were wearing because of the uniqueness, but that sort of went away. So even though this is subtle, I mean, I like the idea that things will look different, as it should. So.
There's also the odd effect with WoW, where if you had a piecemeal set that did exactly what you wanted, you would just be this weird badass hobo clown out on the battlefield. The aesthetics didn't really mesh well together in that game sometimes, especially some of the overly vibrant or pauldron heavy sort of like warlock and wizardy sort of stuff. Some of them was just ridiculous.
Yeah, and I have a feeling we're going to talk about this a little bit more on Sunday, if I remember, because I think there's another game in development that they like the idea of not having matching armor in appearance, and they're expecting people to start off not having matching armor. And I'm fashion over function, so I'm going to match. I don't care how uber my stats are. I've got to look nice. I gotta go down the runway looking nice. And I will take time to wipe or battle my way or figure out how to win with if it's crappy armor, the crappy armor I'm wearing in terms of stats, as long as I look good doing it. Because I'm trying to make a movie, and so my movie's gotta look nice.
Well, I figure the other way is that you'll just use the crappy armor for long enough that you can afford the next set of, nice uniform armor, and then that's just what you're going to use until you can, do the same again later.
Yeah, and so that's another kind of concern I have, not so much with Ashes necessarily, and I think if I like the way they're doing the cosmetics, because also coming from comic books, I do kind of like looking like, Superman. You recognize Superman. I like having iconic costumes, so that you can, well, as they're saying in chat, my beard, if you can recognize my beard from afar, okay. But I like having a signature look and keeping that. Now, that being said, I do kind of like the idea, and again, we'll probably talk about this more on Sunday. I do like the idea of like Batman having ocean costumes and um, you know, different sets of costumes. I guess they did that back when I was a kid. They don't do it so much these days, I think.
Yeah.
But I did like having the different. Well, toys have it, I guess.
I want to say it was in the 90s when they really had all the major variations and stuff as just their own like commercialized version. This isn't even part of any of the cartoons or the comic. This is just some version we whipped out of nowhere to sell you more toys with.
Yeah. Well, back when I was a kid in the comics, he would, if he was going in the ocean, he would have one. If he was going in space, both Superman and Batman. If there was some reason for Superman, they would have, special outfits just for that. And I do kind of like that idea, but if I can, I like keeping a signature piece of armor, signature weapon that I can carry with me. And not so much because like Gandalf, I guess too. Gandalf, you recognize Gandalf because wherever he is, he's going to wear what he's wearing, and you recognize his staff. And I'd prefer that than everybody. Like when you got to WoW, by the time I started heading to max level, everybody's supposed to have the same best in slot gear that looks the same for your class or whatever. I'm not a fan of that.
All right, so there's quite a bit more. I guess.
Yeah, we didn't even start on the list.
No, we didn't. Some of the I guess the housekeeping things. Their hiring is doing fine, is what he says. They're going to do some more hiring in January, hopefully around then. Also move into their new office or their new studio. The Alpha One, they kind of reaffirmed, is still on for later this year. Hopefully that sticks true. I was surprised to hear that they've actually been adding testers. I didn't, obviously we didn't realize they were doing that because none of us are in that testing group. But they said something around 400 plus extra testers, which was
440 testers in the last session. But I think they had 500 total, so it just means a high volume of them may have actually shown up this time. I don't know if they added any more necessarily. And that doesn't mean they necessarily were all on at the same time. It might have people been just, get on for 5 minutes, check it out, and get off, and, get credit for it. Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like they're not doing a 24-hour, 24/7 server like they did with Apocalypse.
Right.
Yeah, he had commented on the late night testing or whatever playing. So.
Yeah, that grind is real over there. Apparently, is up till like 7 one of those days, just not really going to sleep, continuing to work through. So,
And something about that is reminding me that it might be a little premature, but when we were watching the video, and I have not taken the time to do it yet, but I was thinking about going back through and trying to magnify the inventory, because the inventory kind of looks cool. I want to see what's in there. Just the icons in there. I want to see all the stuff that he had there. I don't know what they're playing with in there, but I want to see some of the stuff.
So then we had a big video, basically, quite a long video, mostly looking at mounts, showing off kind of what was there, aquatic mounts. I think they showed flying mounts, two-person or is it two people? Multiple player mounts.
Multiple people. They didn't say two necessarily,
but they didn't show it.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that's kind of nice. So some of the stuff that they talked about is that the aquatic mounts are kind of the inverse of land mounts when it comes to water, where a normal land mount, it can swim at half speed, but it's not going to have a great time. It's probably going to run out of breath fairly quickly, and you have to resurface. Versus an aquatic mount, it's not going to necessarily run out of breath on land, but it's going to be going half speed until it's fully submerged. Once it's fully submerged, you've got, full directional freedom. You can go, up and down and all around, and that's great. I think you're still going to run out of breath, but it's not. They demonstrated, and that's, what we got the title from, the barrel roll, where you kind of jump and I guess kind of walk on top of your turtle mount as it does a spin maneuver and gets you to the surface. So, they anticipate, I'm sure, people going down, being adventurous, maybe getting a skirmish towards the surface, and all of a sudden looking at their oxygen being, well, crap, I got to get the hell out of here. My druid didn't cast my water breathing on me, or wore off, or whatever happened. So it's going to be fun to see how all that works, especially because they said there's going to be content. There's going to be soloable content. There's going to be group content. There's going to be ships. There's going to be, underwater dungeons. The water space is not going to be any less important or worthwhile or dynamic than the space on land. And one of the very nice things is that there isn't the conventional, go out into deep water, start swimming against a stamina bar sort of thing like we saw in WoW and other games, because they anticipate, well, you might be in a naval battle deep in the ocean, and if you get thrown overboard, you're not automatically going to be on this stamina meter where you're going to start dying, pretty quickly, when your ship's right there and can just pick you right back up. So, that's the sort of thing that I'm really excited for. I wonder if you'll even be able to summon your aquatic mount while you're in the water and just, avoid the whole problem entirely. But that's going to be nice to see.
And I wouldn't say that water and naval combat is going to be just as viable as land, because it's still a stretch goal. So it might take some time for it to ramp up, but at least it'll be there. We'll have something. We should have something to start. Something pretty fun to start. But
and to start is right. They even hinted at that they aren't going to have a map that you can circumnavigate. And my developer sense immediately kicks in, saying, "Aha, that's brilliant. That way you can ever expand the map and nobody can really call you on it. It isn't this territory that came out of nowhere, or the planet somehow expanding and new territory appearing," which would be an awesome story of its own, but that's not what they're doing here. I like that it's going to start kind of restricted, and over time they're going to keep expanding out. That's going to give the game a lot of life and give a lot more room as the original continents and stuff start getting more crammed up.
Yep.
So there's a lot in there. So what, where to start? So we were talking about underwater. So that caught me. Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify too. I think it's gliding mounts and not flying mounts, because the flying mounts there's only like 20 of them in the world or less.
Yeah, kings and queens basically, and the rest of them are basically going to be gliding mounts.
But yeah, that's still cool.
Yeah.
Well, so that's one of There's a lot of thoughts going on in my head. I guess we can pick and choose. So flying mounts, yeah. So we know they're not going to be that abundant. Kings and queens, I think they also said, was it legendary? I don't know what the top descriptor of drops is, but
Kings
very
and queens
rare.
and mayors, and then some temporary ones.
Yeah.
A handful. Or
Kind
timed
of
ones.
bends that a little bit by the idea of adding multiplayer flying mounts. That changes it a little bit. It's still rare, but definitely adds on another advantage to having them, especially if you're in some sort of combat situation or something like that, where you can actually fly extra people in with you. I don't know if that's the intention, but to me that changed it a little bit. Initially and this might just be a poor viewpoint in my head, but the way I kind of viewed that as being so rare was it was more of a novelty. There wasn't going to be a lot of necessarily use for it. It was just sort of something you got to show off because of where you were within the game. But as they add in some things like that changes my perception a little bit, that you can start to get some different types of benefits out of flying mounts. I know depending on which game you look at, there is a group of people that are very much against flying mounts, and then others who don't really care too much. I tend to fall into the let there be flying mounts, but
for a game where things are meant to be so tactical and distance is actually a factor, I think reducing the amount of flying mounts overall is actually a good thing. I think there's also something to be said, and it'd be nice if this is something that's actually going to be able to be accommodated, is some sort of peaks or launch system that can be used from a region or somewhere that's been built up for it, that is specifically designed for getting your gliding mounts around. The first thing that came to my head was actually just a tower with a giant catapult on it that you just kind of get yeeted into the air and hope your mount can get its wings underneath it and start gliding so you can get to the next town and then do the same. And that being like the poor adventurer's fast travel system, essentially.
And I'm good
Yeah, and I'm wondering if you have to keep running up the hill, like keep doing a loop, like you jump off, you do your little attack, and then you plop down, you gotta run back up, try it again. We'll have to see.
And I'm okay with the gliding. I mean, I do like having flying mounts. I understand, again, the reasons to not necessarily have it in Ashes. So gliders are, I think, a good compromise, especially playing, was it Genshin Impact? Is that how you say it? There's a lot of gliders in there. So it's okay. The underwater, go ahead. Okay, you were about to say something.
One thing I was going to say is what really breaks it for me with the flying mounts is a game where there's hard terrain barriers between regions, where it suddenly goes from grassy plains to harsh desert or frozen tundra. Because the flying, it's not just on a track when you've got like an auto flying where they've tried to curate it and make it a little nice, but it still looks kind of crummy. It's all of the places like up in hills and along in the areas that are supposed to be like your dividers where the invisible walls are supposed to go, that when you fly over those, it just looks so bad, just terrible. So, for that reason, I'm always a fan of not having the flying mounts and having full free flight, unless they actually design the world in a way where there's incremental change across slopes and across latitude and longitude, so things are more gentle transitions and it isn't just this harsh sort of thing, or where it is a harsh transition, it's one that actually makes sense and it's just a small sort of thing. It isn't one after the other after the other after the other.
Well, I think that's a factor of time. How much time? So if you're going to try and release the game after just 2 years of development, then you better not have flying, because your world probably was not developed very well. But I don't know. I like flying in World of Warcraft over stuff at this point. They've fixed it so that it looks nice to me.
I'm sure it's a lot better now. I only played in vanilla and I remember what it looked like there, and those transitions were so bad.
Yeah, but now that it's taken 5 or 6 years, could be okay.
Well, and you look at the concern, what are the problems with flying there? It's, well, people can drop in, take resources out of the blue, take quest items out of the blue. As you're running there, someone with a fast flying mount just drops down, takes it, and goes. I could see the compounded problems within Ashes where there's, open PvP, basically, of just dropping in on someone and ganking them and taking off. So I understand the reasons. I prefer it. I think I made a comment in chat, as I get older and I have less time to spend, I prefer more time, or I prefer more faster travel. Yes, the journey is fun, not when it takes 30 minutes, though, and I only have like an hour and a half to play. So,
and so in Ashes as well, one of the things that I think sounds great about Ashes is that because the world is constantly changing, we should be continually exploring, or those of us who like to explore, because it's going to change and you're going to want to go back and see how it's changed since the last time you were there. So the journey should still be good regardless of speed. Yeah, I think it's to try and cut down on zerging to combat. It'll take you longer for groups to arrive, so you can't just grab a bunch of people and go trampling all over the map whenever you want to. And the slower the travel, the less you can, or the slower the travel, the more you can cut down on zergs. But
now with that, I also think about the thing they talked about where you will have skills that are different as a driver than as a passenger on the multi-crew mounts, and I would imagine potentially vehicles as well. And that's actually quite exciting to me, because then that comes to the idea of your battle bus or your war elephant, that you've got something that you can ride in with a group who are throwing javelins or shooting arrows, especially with those gigantic bows you can't really use standing up normally, that sort of stuff, mounted ballistas, whatever. Mini catapults on the backs of raptors like Golden Axe, all that sort of stuff. That's pretty cool. I'd love to see that sort of stuff. And I'd like to see how it's going to be able to be used as a tool of waging war and combat, not just on large groups of NPCs where you ride in and smash them all up real easy, but potentially where it'll actually be used in a larger battle, being able to use it as a transport to get a bunch of people to the front lines real fast and then get back out of there, load up for the next one. So that's also pretty exciting. That's going to be really cool to see how all of that plays out. And then I guess one other thing on top of that from the video that's exciting to me is the fact that they talked about the attributes and progression and all of that stuff for mounts is going to be very similar to that of players, that it's not just you get experience, you get some small stat boost, this, that, and the other. It sounds like there's going to be a lot going into building up and training and leveling your mount, that it's going to be something that's just as important to leveling your characters up. So that's kind of interesting to me. I wonder if you'll actually be able to trade mounts that have been leveled, or if it's the sort of thing that you get it, you level it, it's yours, and it's only yours.
Yeah, and that's a big part of animal husbandry that I'm super curious. I want to, for those who haven't watched this before, my focus, Diggs the Explorer. Thank you to everyone that's doing the bits, Theater Elf and Bartik as well. But yeah, Diggs is the Explorer. I sort of want to just have a farm, and then Neuro explores everything basically. The animal husbandry part is very interesting to me. We just don't know a lot about it, and breeding mounts and things like that. Hopefully something... this kind of moves me into my next topic, which is the underwater sort of mounts and combat. We talk about So we talked about the Kickstarter. You mentioned the stretch goal of naval combat and sort of explored exploration in the seas. I was kind of surprised by the, just jumping right into the, yes, we're going to have full underwater combat, dungeons, raids. And the reason though I was surprised is just, well, how much have you done for the above land normal sort of game that we're used to playing? I like the idea of underwater stuff, but not at the expense of having to wait, another 2 or 3 years of figuring it all out. I mean, the reality is we are now moving into, 2016 was the Kickstarter, so 4 years getting into five, finally, and we all, this isn't a complaint as far as they're taking too long. We all of us here understand. We've been doing this long enough. We understand it takes a while. Where we've kind of talked about and where I get concerned is just when we add more and more the sort of feature creep, which was sort of more notorious early on with the yes, you ask a question, will you have this? Yes, we'll have that. And that got better over time. Over the last year, it's been more so, well, maybe, but it won't be right away. So when I hear, oh yeah, we're going to also have all of this underwater content for you, it's sort of, I don't know, that raised a question because the Kickstarter, and I pulled it up here to make sure I wasn't misremembering. The Kickstarter stretch goal was just added ships and exploration. It did expanded underwater environments. It didn't really talk about all of this combat and raids and all these other systems as far as a stretch goal. Again, I think it's a great idea, but I would much prefer to see everything working in just sort of the traditional land, maybe with ships that you can have combat with. But I don't know. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, but if you can build it up front, it's going to be better. If that's what you want, it's better to start building it up front than trying to add it on later. That's why people usually complain about PvP sucking, because they start traditionally with PvE and then try and tack PvP on later, and it just is not as robust. So start in the beginning if you have the time. And I think the real problem for me 4 years ago was that Steven was saying we're going to do all of this stuff and we're going to get it done in 2 years, and that just was unrealistic. But you learn that after you become a dev.
It's one of those things where I guess it's kind of nice that okay, no, I'm not going to say that. There happens to be an opportunity that due to the pandemic, it's also feasible to say that there were delays in development, but in reality wanting to kind of overreach on the goals and put more in. But no, then I 100% agree with what you originally said, Diggs, that if it's going to go in, it's always better to get it in as soon as possible so it can be handled with the initial pass of balancing and tuning and supply chains and resources and time investment and overall difficulty and all of that sort of stuff. It never feels good when something is tacked on. It never feels good when something seems like it's being tacked on. So being able to get all of this stuff in, I think it's probably going to be worth the development delay or the additional hands on deck they're going to need to require to get it in. But I also wonder, based on the way that they've designed the rest of the game systems in the game world, how much it's a break from what they've already got planned and how the systems already work. Or is it basically the exact same systems and it's just like, well, it's underwater, it's off the coast, but it follows the exact same rules. And if that's the case, then it actually isn't adding that much to their development, other than probably all of the art and animations and effects and stuff of and related to the sea content, and probably also just creatures that are exclusive to it. So honestly, I imagine it's a higher art budget than overall design to get it done. And it's one of those things where there's always so many amazing artists out there, that can get the job done that they can hire. So if they haven't already gotten the team they wanted for it, I'm sure they can fill it out pretty easily. Again, they are continuing to hire.
Because what I worry about, what I keep, and I think I mentioned it before, is what I'm starting to call the sort of crowfall effect, right? This idea that you had a brilliant, and I think crowfall is a good idea. It's a a game that really fills a niche that didn't exist before, as far as what they're trying to do. But they've been in development for so long, and open development for so long, where you could buy in, 2-3 years ago and be testing, playing. They hit this big milestone of beta, and it's like fell flat. And it's not necessarily because it's a bad game. I don't think. And again, it does. They don't lie about what they are. It does what it says what they wanted it to do. But I feel like it's because there's been such a long open development process. And so that's what I worry about, is getting stuck into this. Well, let's get another feature in, sort of thing. Now, the argument against that is, okay, well, if you don't let it be open testing the whole way. So something like Pantheon is doing, these very defined pre-alpha stints, alpha stints, where it's only open for a few hours, actually, each, Saturdays and Sundays, and then it's gone. And that's what I think helps keep that excitement alive. But you're smiling, Diggs. I don't know if it's me or something else.
It's something you said, but
what?
I'm gonna let you finish.
I'll
get
ahead.
there. Finish.
No, I mean, that's the main thing. I just it's
yeah. So because you mentioned Crowfall, and I think the problem with Crowfall is that they kind of had, one of the problems is they kind of had some of the same problem that New World had, in that they wanted to be a crush kind of game, and they found out that a lot of people aren't as into the crush as they had hoped. And I'm especially smiling because it's made by the same people as Shadowbane, and they started off with Shadowbane, and it was supposed to be all PvP, super PvP, and it kind of failed. And then they made Wizard 101. So it just,
which is one of your favorite games, right?
It's one of my favorite games, but it is not we came to crush kind of game. And they tried it again with Crowfall, and they had to tone that down a little bit because, like you were saying, with the PvP, not as many people want to play to crush as PvPers, hardcore PvPers would hope.
I had a lot of comments on that show, so on YouTube.
So, but yeah, and it's fine. I think Crowfall seemed to be trying to get that game out fairly quickly too, originally, and we know it's going to take 4 to 5 years, not 2 to 3 years. So
it's just, I don't know. I keep, here we are, the end of the year now for alpha state. There's still no cleared, video of nodes in action. They've shown us rough ends, but, no real gameplay experience. And there's still all of these other things that need to be done still. And it's just, and I assume that's why they're going through the hiring sprint. And I hope, that the other part, all of these fears are not because and this is where I think people, especially on YouTube, get me wrong. It's not because I want Ashes to fail. I was like the number 3 backer on Kickstarter. I'm super excited. I don't want to lose my money. I already did that with Illyria. Don't want to do it again. It's more so just, we've seen a lot of games come and fail with our show. We've not yet covered one that's made it to success. So we've been through quite a lot of observation, and both of you have more, actual experience in the space, working in the space. I don't, but you both do. So all of this is just mainly out of voicing the concerns of what could be a problem with getting out to release. Because the other part, they've really in the last 3-4 months have exploded in exposure too. A lot of the top streamers have sort of picked up on it. But here we are still kind of waiting for a lot of these things to happen. So then I hear something like, oh, yeah, you're going to have full underwater combat raids. It just raises my concern level a little bit as to, okay, well, what are we trying to get done? Because in an honest question, has anyone here ever had a good experience in an MMO with combat underwater?
Well, so I was about to bring that up. So I think the original thing that they talked about was naval combat, and that seemed to be focused on ships.
And that's what I had anticipated.
Combat.
Yeah, that's what I had anticipated.
And so I think the concern, and I want to touch bases with Neuro because he played around with this more than we did in Landmark, is the up in the air combat. So, we finally got combat introduced into Landmark, and then we had those, I forgot what the name of the boots were, but they let you jump super far in the air. So most of the combat was people tumbling and twisting and doing all kinds of stuff in the air.
I'll
And
tell
it
you
turned out
what,
that wasn't fun.
that was actually just a rehash of a system that I had already gotten used to a long time ago. Legends of Might and Magic, 3DO's last game, 8v8 fantasy Counter-Strike shooter. If you get into the files, you would see there was a much bigger story-based RPG they were working on, but they had to cut and run with something because things were getting grim, and they, went under not fairly long after. It was like the February after they released it. I think it was like July the year before. That game was all about using basically like a magical medium armor, a scroll of jump, so you always have extreme jump height, a scroll of feather fall, so you don't, I don't know what that was, take a whole bunch of damage when you fall off of things, especially if you miss a jump, between two pieces of furniture along a wall or something like that. And there was one or two of the characters' weapons that were very similar to the ones in Landmark. Additionally, it was a Lithtech engine game that wasn't made with Lithtech's direct support, which means the netcode and latency was terrible. So it was actually, for me, just a rehashing of a sort of combat style I had already played before. And it was kind of hilarious to me. It was like giving me these flashbacks of like, late high school, early college. But yeah, I definitely thought the combat in that was kind of funny, and the combat that we saw in Apocalypse was kind of funny. That felt like a whole lot of fighting in the air too, and constantly jumping and charging and stuff like that. But in general, I think I actually do like underwater combat in games. In fact, that very same game I was talking about, Legends of Might and Magic, there were a lot of places where winning or losing a map was a matter of being able to control the waterways in a certain area of a map. There were a couple of maps that I made where I basically threw a ladder brush in an open space. It was essentially like swimming. You were able to go up and down in all the other directions. Everybody loved those maps for combat. They were the best arenas. So it's definitely something that I think has merit, and I think underwater combat actually could do a lot of really fun things with. You could actually have more of a weight threshold by which people sink. So you've got people that are specifically designed to be like underwater surface shock troopers or whatever. You got your heavy badasses down there, and they're using throwing javelins and harpoons and stuff upward from their position. That could be a very interesting sort of dynamic to see. How we're going to see surface and underwater combat from aquatic mounts and people riding them, or aquatic mount to ship combat. That's all going to be pretty interesting to see. I'm really excited to see how all of that plays out. I don't think the idea of water-based combat was really something well addressed in a lot of games before. And in something like WoW, I definitely felt like anything you did underwater was tacked on rather than part of the original design and flow of what they expected everyone to do for the most part.
Yeah, and I was trying to envision for my movie what kind of uh, emotes or actions that I would want in a for underwater combat, like squatting on like kind of the side of a um, rock formation underwater and launching myself off of it. There's animations that I would want to see. Super. What do we call it? Heroic. What? Heroic movement. What was it in Landmark? Um, Whatever that was. I'm really into heroic.
You mean their
movement.
parkour movement?
They called it. I think
They
it was
call it
something like
parkour.
heroic movement, and I was hoping for villainous movement. But those things that make you look like you're a hero when you're traveling or in combat. And there's things that I would want to see if I were doing underwater combat that really took advantage of the fact that I was, moving through the water, combating through the water. But they're kind of doing that with the mounts. So maybe I don't even know if I would need that individually, as long as my mounts could do stuff like the barrel roll. As long as they're doing cool stuff underwater and I can be on them and have and use their attack abilities, that might be cool enough.
I've just never experienced anything that felt right. Whether that's the difference in movement, because now it's not just back, forth, side to side. You have up, down, a lot of differences in how you can move, combined with some of the physics and being in water, things being slower. It's just I've never had an experience that felt right.
Yeah, and so, but what they showed us of riding along on the mounts looked really good. So now they just have to show us what some of the attack skills of these mounts are when they're underwater.
Wow, and that's
we'll feel better about it.
Yeah, and that's some of the other questions. We always run out of time. Here it was 8:17. I thought we're going to have plenty of time. We've not even gotten to the Q&A. That kind of gets into some of the Q&A. There were questions about movement stats, different speeds for mounts, questions about saddle benefits, things to combat and that sort of thing, which of course the answer is yes. You will have differences in speed based off the rarity of the mount. Yes, you'll have differences from stats from saddles based off of the rarity of the saddle, or whatever it is. I still have an issue that with the store and sort of how things are worded with the skins. I still have kind of an issue because I don't think if you're new to this, especially as they get more exposure, you might not be as aware that, because a lot of the text is very descriptive. The one they just released, which they're putting out some absolutely amazing looking art and some awesome, and I mean the game looks beautiful. Their art looks just top notch, awesome. And there's a new mount now. And the flavor text basically said something about creaking of the bones. I had just responded, of course, already knowing that, we're not going to have benefits from skins, but just something like, does it actually make the sound as you move? Because that, at the time, I think there was also conversation about, I'm forgetting the word, but anyways, I just asked about the sounds. Does it actually make sounds? And of course, the response was, well, no, that's just flavor text, and it gets into some of these things. I don't think people realize that, because it's very descriptive in what they do.
Yeah. That's kind of lame, though. Like, if it isn't a full conversion kit, what are we actually getting? You get the appearance of, like, a skeletal horse or something like that, but you don't get the sound of it. That's a little bit weird to me, especially if you're putting the skin... Like, what audio set does it use, I guess, is my question. Because if I'm not mistaken, you can use a wide variety of skins on types of mounts. Just so long as it's a land mount, you can put any land mount skin on it, from what I understand.
Because this was also a question, because again, I realized that it's not pay to win, so you're not going to buy a mount that has special abilities versus other, that's just not how it works. But at the time I thought, well, okay, this is a sound, right? This isn't pay to win. This is a descriptor of the mount itself. So then that leaves me with questions of like other things, the flames rise from, as they describe something, does it actually not do that? Like if I put this object on my freehold, does it actually not have some of the things that are in the descriptive text? Mm-hmm. That'd be kind of disappointing. So I still kind of have a little bit of an issue with that. But
that's reminding me of my G.I. Joe fortresses I used to get when I was a kid, and like, oh, they're gonna do this cool thing. Oh no, it doesn't do that cool thing. Okay.
Underwater advantages, crafters. So the question was, will players be able to craft, just sticking with the underwater theme, items that provide underwater advantages? And the answer is yes. Underwater breath buffs, speed buffs, and more will be present, but they will not have any sort of vision changes underwater. So nothing to improve your ability to see underwater. That kind of came from also the video. If you looked, it was fairly hard to see the underwater. But as they mentioned, it's sort of, it's obviously pre-alpha state at this point, pre-alpha alpha. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Again, a lot of work that needs to be done in addition to underwater raids, combat, dungeons, and warfare. So.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things they did talk about, keeping visibility even for everyone so that people with limited hardware aren't at a disadvantage to people who, their hardware could potentially render everything in beautiful 8K all the way off to the horizon, but they won't let you. You get a cutoff of some sort. I wonder what that cutoff is going to be, if it's going to be like a kind of blur in the distance sort of thing, or if there's just like a light haze, a light foggy haze that just follows you everywhere.
That's actually an interesting. You just sparked a thought. Haven't they made a comment before that some of these, depending on how powerful your machine are, that you might not be seeing all of this level of detail? I thought there's sort of an auto balancing in for that, but.
By the time this game comes out, it's not going to be an issue. I think we will be seeing some of the detail. The strange thing about that is the way the saddles and barding and backpack works, such that it's supposed to display your items that you put on there. That's the level of detail that I find fascinating, especially since in some other games, it's not even going to show your jewelry and stuff like that. I think what Theater Elf asks about how you're going to get accessories like the staff, which could be a weapon, but wouldn't have to be a weapon. Like, it's not pay to win, so maybe you shouldn't be getting a weapon along with your costume, but maybe if it's just a cosmetic.
It's just a cosmetic. I think all of the things are just something you apply to an existing item you own.
Yeah.
Which, again, if I have an option to turn that off, I'm so going to turn it off. It's not that I don't love the amazing art that they're doing and all of this, but I personally prefer everything to be as representative as possible. I'm just that kind of guy. Like, it's more tactical, it's more immersive. Somebody's got badass armor, I want to see it, but it's because they have badass armor, not because they bought a badass skin and they put it on, tinfoil plate mail.
8K is a myth, but 4K is pretty good. And I think maybe
I wasn't saying that the game's going to have 8K. I'm just saying your system could potentially run it if you've got like 3 3080s running together or something ridiculous like that you spend 10 G's on.
I think if the things, some of the stuff that you can get, like, it should be pretty easy to get a basic staff that doesn't have any, real hit points. Probably is a cheap thing, and again, might not even. That's something you can buy from a vendor, probably. So I'm not too worried about getting a staff to apply a skin to.
So let's see what else. As we start to run out of time, I did the beds. So the idea of a bunk bed. I don't know if you caught that. You get rested.
Hilarious.
Yeah, rested experience from sleeping in your bed.
Well, you get rested experience, but then you get bonuses to it.
So I'm sitting there as he's saying this, thinking, how am I going to get a friend that I can convince to log in and out with me at the same time to double?
Did they say you couldn't just have an alt that's in there, or?
Well, it did. It was not explained further. Yeah,
okay.
But
Does it have to be a player? Can it be an NPC?
Again, didn't really say.
Yeah. If it's your family house, you would imagine your family is there.
Sometimes you have to lock the door for.
Well, I do wonder how that works because there's, as the comment offering to be in my bed with me, do you? I mean, is that a viable, right? You have a lot of, again, we don't know much about crafting. So can you craft a bed that gives better rested experience than others, right? So can you somehow boost the rate of rested experience gain by being a legendary crafter in making beds? And if so, can you have a freehold where all you do is make basically a hotel of beds and charge people to come in when they log out, get double the rate of rested experience, and move on?
Sure. That's brilliant.
I mean, it's an interesting question. It sounds like it might be possible. And then he got into the idea of couples sharing a bed, and I don't know if that was joking around or what. I know he often talks about.
He was saying about that. It sounded very serious. That if you've got your character designated as your mate or partner or whatever that you're sharing the bed with, that you get super bonuses. But they also said nothing adult. It's going to be like 1 foot out of the bed sort of thing, fully clothed under the sheets.
Yeah, it was still creepy back in vanilla EQ to have people following you around, dropping their clothes, asking you if you want to cyber. Cyber me, come on, cyber me, follow me behind this corner, cyber.
I wish. I really hope there's a way that certain language players use. You can just petition to add corruption to them. And if the GM sees it's like, oh, what? You're getting naked and asking the cyber? Oh, hell no. Level 20 corruption. You are getting your ass whooped for that, buddy.
No, as Tavernside says, you get a plus to intellect and a minus to stamina as you share your bed with your husband or wife. So that's hilarious. But actually, as we sit here, you talk about corruption. Maybe what if we have a bed that reduces corruption? I'm just trying to think of ways to make a financial business without combat. So I do like the idea of a little hotel.
The bed of shame with the itchiest wool sheets on the itchiest straw, just in the corner of the room.
I mean, yeah. If they give us controls of who can come into our freehold, right? If they can extend those controls to say how long, we'll let someone say there. Okay, I'll give you 8 hours for 200 gold. Bed right in there.
Corrupted. If you house the corrupted, can the bounty hunters break your door down?
Oh yeah,
if a bounty hunter breaks your door down, is it self-defense? Can you knock them out without getting corruption?
I mean, that's yeah. They're going to offer ways to reduce corruption. So let's make a business out of it. Give me a way to reduce it in my freehold, and I'll charge people to come do it. Which actually brings me to one of the other questions they had mentioned, which I was glad it was asked because this followed our conversation on sort of PvP, open PvP and everything. It was, what would prevent someone from having their friends or guild members kill them to reduce their corruption and giving them their gear or items back after death? The answer to that is nothing. Nothing prevents them from doing that. The rationale given was, well, it's still a risk, and I guess it is. But I mean, if you're with your buddies, you're not going to be expecting them to take your gear and not give it back. And then the other part was, well, bounty hunters can see you. Well, okay, but if I'm with my guild of 50 people, is a bounty hunter really going to matter? Maybe if it was 20 bounty hunters, but is a single bounty hunter going to matter when I'm with a group of my friends?
So this reminds me of when I was playing vanilla EQ with my girlfriend back in the day. And it was like her first time playing. So I took her to a spot and I said, okay, stay here. You're going to be fighting these skeletons. Keep your back to the wall here. And just as they come to you, go ahead and fight them. I'm going to run over here and kind of try and finish this quest real quick. And then I'm going to come back and grab you. And after 15 minutes, she starts screaming from the other room, "Help, help, come help me. Somebody killed me. Somebody came over and killed me. Um, and I can't get back to my corpse." And I was like, "Okay, I'll be over there in a second." And then 3 minutes later, she says, "Oh, never mind. Somebody was kind enough to help me. They just asked me to give them permission to loot my corpse." And I was like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "Well, nobody would like really steal my stuff. I mean, nobody would be that mean in the game that they would." I was like, "Yeah, they would." Like, crazy person. Um, but um, yeah. And then what was the other thing about that? What were you talking about, Phantom? I just forgot that quickly. Um, looting corpse runs. Say it again. Oh, the zombie thing. Yeah, I would. If I were going to be my zombie, I would just leave all my armor that I didn't want off. I don't want that armor anyway. I'm going to be a zombie, so why would I have my cool armor on? I'd keep that off and just let people try and kill me. Yeah, aren't people who want corruption are not going to be wearing their best armor.
Makes sense. It reminds me of what my friends used to do before they would limit the rate you could make and delete new characters in Ultima Online, which was get their buddies together, make characters with 50 in tactics and 50 in clubs, get a mace, go out in whatever armor they've got, and find some dude in heavy armor and plate and just beat him up and smash his armor to pieces. Even if you manage to kill them, they've still completely destroyed your armor. So it was like the perfect troll move, and you could just keep on doing that over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
A couple of other things, I guess we're kind of at the end here. One thing I did like, there was a question about AoE damage. Will there be a hard cap on how many players can be hit by AoE? The answer is we're not really sure, but they're leaning towards probably not. Not having sort of a diminishing returns, which I like the idea of. I just in vanilla World of Warcraft sort of battlegrounds, Alderac Valley, sitting up on the mountain as the horde are rushing by and just blanketing the area with blizzard after blizzard was super fun. And no, it did not always win. Right, so it's not like it's your OP sort of moment, but it was fun to do. Starting to add diminishing returns kind of reduces the reason for doing that, anyways. So I was happy to see that. A lot of these questions, I think do you have anything to add?
Oh no, it's just that I think that's something that actually should be on a per AOE basis, where something like a fireball, for example, could be highest damage at the center and then less damage as it radiates outward, versus something like a blizzard that it stays in place for a little while. I could see full damage for being in it, but there's a limited amount of people that can be in it, and you have the agency to move out of it. So full damage if you're foolish enough to still be in it after you're first hit with it. Lightning or something like that, I could see as it arcs, it diminishes some amount in value, or maybe it only targets people wearing metal armor, for example, or using metal weapons. So your spellcasters wearing cloth with a staff might actually be able to evade it entirely. I'd like to see that sort of variance to it, so there's more tactics than I'm using this element's AoE spell, I'm using this element's AoE spell, and then there's actually a lot of character to the AoE spells and abilities themselves and how they actually play out on the battlefield. A warrior cleave ability, it makes sense that there's diminished damage after the first person you make contact with. So, I mean, that's something that'll be nice. And then one of the other ones here, did you have anything you wanted to say on that?
No, I'm just kind of... he's typing. Go ahead.
Okay. The next one was the party duel instead of 1v1. So dueling is basically you put a flag down and you and the other person start fighting within an area. They said it's probably not too difficult to extend that to a group. So it's feasible that we'll see some sort of group versus group sort of PvP, as well as the normal version, just of 1v1. And funny one, if nodes are at war, you can participate in party events and co-events, even if your guildies are in a different warring node. Maybe they gave this whole idea of what they're planning on doing with it, how you can be flagged with somebody as at war but still group up with them and do events and get full experience and loot and stuff, but that they're also still totally undecided. And talking about the idea of they don't have factions, so what you have instead are micro factions. And quite honestly, I feel like the sanctity of the party as like the highest group of the hierarchy is something they should really embrace. That if you and 4 other people, friend or foe, whatever unlikely alliance you have, come together and form a party that's certified in the user interface, that should go above and beyond all other allegiances and all other things, because in that moment, that's your squad, that's your team. You've got their back, they've got your back. You're working together on something. And so I feel like that should ultimately be the solution. Is it doesn't matter, what the affinity is, what the relation. You could be at war on every single axis, but there's still some reason. In fact, Diggs, you would probably be able to cite plenty of examples of stories where there's been exactly that, where it's, two champions of different warring factions that are the ones who end up coming together to kind of resolve the war or move it forward one way or the other. And I would imagine that'd be the sort of thing that they'd even like to be able to have, is that level of, going above and beyond the lines of, battle that have been drawn, to still be able to work with people. It could be that those people were just your friend a week ago and then everybody went to war, there's no reason why you wouldn't still be friends with those people. They're not suddenly, different people that you have to kill now. So I would like to see that as their solution, that above all, you can basically always party with anybody. You might suffer consequences for it. It might be reported to your guild if you're caught partying up with people from a guild you're warring with, whatever. But I think it should be there as an option for sure, and be the thing that kind of goes above and beyond the rest.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see how those things work and what lengths people will go to fight with or ally various lowercase factions. Whether it's, I want to ally with this node even though my guild is at war and all those things. But and I really hope that we can get more towards, character relationships versus player relationships. But we'll have to see, because I don't really I'm not really into player versus player. I'm into character versus character. And there's kinds of things you can do there. Um, I used to always say, if you want to, if I flagged for PvP because I want to spend an hour defending a town, and then after that hour I'm done and I want to just go harvest for the next 2 hours. Um, if somebody comes up and they want a PvP, I'm not going to want a PvP. But if you let me harvest for 2 hours, I'll log on tomorrow and we can PvP for a fucking hour. Like, just leave me alone, player to player, and let me do what I want for my game session. And then we can get together and we can battle it out. Our characters can battle it out and role play that tomorrow. But that's not the way it works. in MMORPGs.
Anything else? The only other thing I was going to kind of bring up was this mentoring program that they kind of talked about, which sounded super interesting. I think it's a great idea as long as it's not obviously exploitable. It makes a good point about retaining players. It sounds interesting. This idea that people who have been around, because that's the problem now is trying to go back to many of these MMOs that have been out for a long time. It's like, where do you start? Everyone's already way past you. You're talking about, for many of these, a good solid few months of investing time just to get up to being able to play with your friends. So having this sort of mentoring program as a way to kind of keep the world populated with players, I think is a great idea. Because one thing we've, I think, learned over the last 5-10 years, or has happened more so now, is people's attention spans are shorter. And as they have options to play other things, when EverQuest was around, it was EverQuest, Ultima Online, eventually Dark Ages of Camelot.
59. I want to say The Realm was around at that time.
But not a lot of not a lot of things to pick from. So now there's a lot of stuff to do. So people can lose interest very fast. So any way you can kind of help retain or bring in new people, positive thing to have. Because that's something we talk about quite a bit. Last show I talked quite a bit about is how do you keep PvEers and casual players interested, because they're going to be the ones that you need long term to kind of make things run smoothly. So it's a good idea, good program, assuming it works. Anything else?
Speed run the rest of them. It's nice that they kind of talked about harbors will actually have some amount of offense and defense. When a node has water adjacency, it'll have hooks for the harbor. It'll be able to get built up and kind of hook up with a harbor system. Then there'll be objectives available at that node based on its situation that will accommodate the fact that it's got a harbor and potentially content that harbor can help people access. I think that's great. I'm glad to see that, and I'm looking forward to it. Again, if this is the naval and water content being put as part of 1.0 and not a stretch goal, that's pretty cool. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. Legendary drops will be rivaled through crafting, but by legendary crafting of legendary or legendary tier crafters with legendary tier materials harvested at a legendary level and then processed by legendary processors. So everything's got to be legendary, but if you've got that entire chain and the entire supply line for it, yeah, you can make those legendary beds that give the queen and king like a 5x resting bonus. Sure. That's awesome.
And 5 kids.
Yeah, and 5 kids. That's that'll be cool to see, though, that the crafting system will allow for the highest level of things, no matter potentially how exclusive the items are to make them, put them together. It's nice that it's there. It's nice that it's going to be more than just what drops in the world being the best things in the game. Repairs don't diminish an item. So that's a nice sort of thing. And then repairs aren't going to be go to a vendor, give them gold. Instead of a gold sink, it's going to be a material sink. You want your steel item repaired, you need to put more steel into it. You need your wood thing restored, you're going to need to put some wood into it. I like that. I like that it's actually using the materials that the stuff is made out of for the repair process rather than just being a gold sink. You're going to probably have to spend gold if you don't have people available or you can't do the job yourself. But, it's nice that it isn't just walk to vendor, give gold, okay, things are repaired.
So will people, like people do piecemeal armor, or will they end up doing piecemeal weapons because they don't want to take the time to go out and get the legendary wood? So they'll get the almost legendary wood to repair it?
That's a good question. I wonder if a legendary quality item even suffers damage.
Well, I'm just saying, whatever, even getting up to that, whatever it is, maybe people will be like, yeah, I don't want to take the time. Or maybe I'm too far away from the legendary crafter who can craft it. I'll go to the journeyman guy to craft this part or repair it for now, and who knows?
I mean, I think of like 500 years ago, the best sword you could have is a sword that's well balanced, that doesn't rock your hand when you hit something with it. The blade's never going to dull or never going to break. That's pretty much the best anybody could ask for in a sword, is knowing that it's never going to fail them in combat, and it's comfortable for them to use. So, obviously in a magical fantasy sort of sense, what's going to be legendary is going to be asking a lot more than something like that. But I imagine as you get into the higher quality stuff, you're getting into things that the amount of damage that it suffers and what it would actually even take to damage it becomes incredibly reduced, to the point where maybe a legendary thing won't ever actually break unless, I don't know, it clashes with another legendary item for 100 hours or something. Be interesting to see how that all plays out. We'll get there when we get there. Not all abilities can be converted between targeting modes, and the functionality of the ability still needs to make sense. So the example I give is a fireball. If you can normally only cast a fireball on a target, but you want to be able to cast it on an area to hit people kind of equidistant in a group, that seems like the sort of thing where you'd be able to invest skill into changing it from a direct target sort of thing to a skill targeting sort of thing. They said clothes will not be affected by the environment. They will not have surface appearance differences. They will not be soaked or stained or anything like that. If something's happening because you're in an environment that makes you more susceptible to cold damage or heat damage, it's because of the environment, not because of what you're wearing. Or, not because of what's applied to what you're wearing, I should say. One other one is a guild audit log, and I think that'll be the last one off the list here. That they're going to definitely have something that if you're a guild officer or leader, you'll be able to know what's going on, who's taking and giving resources, who's left the guild, who's been recruited, who's changed anybody's ranks. A full log of that sort of thing definitely helps to have. As Stephen was saying, it sucks to log on as a guild leader and then see the number of people in the guild has changed with no explanation. So, it's nice that they're thinking about those sorts of administrative things. So that's really all I've got. Yeah. That was basically my list.
Actually, quite a bit for what I thought at the time was sort of an uneventful live stream. There's actually quite a little stuff packed in there.
Yeah. Gotta kind of sift through it to get all the gold nuggets. But yeah, that one was actually, and I guess I do have one other thing. They do a very good job of keeping the live streams and the content on just a few subjects. I could easily see them drifting and talking about a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of everything else, and potentially being something where, they just glaze over everything just a tiny little bit rather than really getting into depth. But then the other thing is it also means what's being talked about in chat and what's being, focused on in general is a few specific subjects, which allows them to be more concentrated like this and allows us to get more nuance and more stuff explained. And yes, you're right there in a chat down Nomad. Margaret Crone is very, very good at her job. Mad props to her. She's like super, super good. So it's been great to see that, and I'm really looking forward to the next one.
It's also been really engaging despite not being able to have the individual dev people come on like Bacon. We haven't seen Bacon in probably 5 or 6 months. We can't do those little dev corners like we could before, but it's still been fun to watch, so that's good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up tonight. This Sunday, actually, in just 4 days, 3 days, we will have Chris Joppa Perkins, creative director for Pantheon, actually is going to be joining us on Sunday and kind of talking about, I think, some of the current state of Pantheon. I'm sure we have questions about what they're doing with it now, where they're going with it. Also, I think questions about his experience over 5 years. So he actually was with us in April of 2015. And so, 5 years is a long time to kind of catch up on sort of what he's experienced in creating an MMO. So it'll be the same time as always, 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 Pacific. And so we'll be back here in 2 Sundays with the next Ashes show. And in between, on Tuesdays, Thursdays, I do try to stream. And actually, I think Diggs might be joining me some on that with some Baldur's Gate 3 co-op play. So as always, join our Discord. We'd like to chat there. Hit us up on Twitter, anywhere really. YouTube, I check the messages on the videos all the time as well. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you Sunday.
And then
See ya.
take care, everybody.